it is very purposeful. It is not just giving the kids like privileges and positive reinforcement for negative behaviors, but it's truly a scientific process. And we need, I think, that mentality and that culture to just not be in just that pocket of industry experts, but something that the teachers, the educators, anybody who is in that building can really understand exactly what's happening in a kid's brain when they're dysregulated.
And so that's where the, OT, occupational therapist, or a therapist would come in and work with parents and the kids collaboratively. So they're on the same page and be able to say, hey, I'm in red zone. I need to do this, and see that and follow whatever's going to work best for not only the child, person, but that unit, right, as a whole.
When we think of trauma, we tend to think of big life-altering events like near-fatal car crash, loss of a child, violence witnessed by first responders and frontline medical staff. These are all the experiences we often associate with deep, lasting wounds.
But too often we fail to realize that trauma also lives in the quieter, everyday moments, like the parent dismissing a child as too sensitive, or a teacher mislabeling a dysregulated student as disruptive, or an adult employee silently carrying the weight of the workplace stress because they fear seeking help could ultimately cost them their job.
As an educator, an example of one of these smaller but still really traumatic things we experience is that we love our students so deeply, but often their life challenges are out of our control or things we're not able to help them with. But we still carry the weight of their own life traumas with us, and not being able to really help them makes it extra challenging.
And in my work as an adult psychologist, especially working with military veterans and law enforcement clients, I've seen the exact same thing. The young Marine Corps corporal who doesn't want to come in to be seen because he's afraid his sergeant or staff sergeant is going to make fun of him, or he'll get pulled from fit for full duty, put on a med ward, kicked out of the military, seen as weak. There's so many reasons that folks just in that specific subpopulation don't want to come in to be seen.
So that's why being aware of trauma comes in all forms, major and minor. It is so critical. It's the first step in helping others learn the tools to heal, because no matter how big or small, trauma is always trauma.
So today we're breaking down how trauma-informed care and mindful awareness can transform the way we lead, teach, and support one another. We'll cover a couple of cool topics. So why asking what happened to you works better than asking what's wrong with you? Practical strategies like breathing exercises and sensory tools that help people regulate before addressing behaviors. The systemic barriers that keep professionals from nurses and law enforcement from accessing mental health support. How generational trauma lingers when left unchecked, and how we can disrupt this cycle. And lastly, the unsexy but game-changing habits like art therapy and even simple checklists that rebuild nervous system safety.
Yeah, to guide us through this, we're super excited to welcome Dr. Shanea Clancy, who is a forensic nurse, trauma-informed leadership strategist, and a best-selling author who's reshaping how organizations approach healing. So let's get into it. As a specialist in mindful awareness and trauma-informed systems, Dr. Clancy equips Fortune 500 companies, universities, and schools to turn trauma awareness into actionable change.
And her work with UPS, Penn State, and the Tim Tebow Foundation has redefined what healing-centered leadership actually looks like. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here today.
All right. So Dr. Clancy, before we get started, I personally am on a mission. I really want to destigmatize the human experience. I truly believe that human experiences are generally really uncomfortable, awkward, and challenging. And there are so many components and so many emotions that go into being human. So #BeHuman. If you don't mind, Shanea, if you could just tell us one moment in time, something that has happened to you this week or recently, something that was just a very human moment.
I was recently coaching a client, and she did not have a lot of confidence coming into the sessions leading up to the session we had actually this week. And to see her flourish and just come out of her shell was a game changer, because she had been struggling a lot with confidence, ability, and resources. And then it just finally clicked. And so it's like that ability to persevere, even though there was like the context and fear of the unknown. it was just super awesome to see even the facial changes that she had of just like that calming, relaxing, and even more so with it being, mental health month. I was like, yes.
Thank you for sharing. It's always great to remember the things that make us human. With that, could you share how your nursing and entrepreneurial journeys collided to shape your work?
I think oftentimes nurses in particular tend to come out of nursing school and not view themselves as a leader, when the reality is that nursing is the most trusted profession, period, right? Like we're frontline staff and it's nursing week this week. So it's just kind of ironic that this paired up. And I came to the conclusion that it was a lot to do with people not feeling empowered or having the tools or the mindset, right? Or the skills to negotiate, even going into that first job. And when the light bulb clicked, it was when I was working at one of my first jobs. And I was like, there's more to this. There's more. I was on committees and different things, but I was like, there's more to it. And then school just became a challenge. It was, you know what? People can never take education from you. And whatever happens even before that, or any deterrence or struggles throughout that, doesn't mean it has to define the trajectory of the rest of our life. And so I just picked up my bootstraps and was like, we're going to do this, and sought mentors, opportunities. And I thought I was going to be done at my doctorate. And 3 months later, after giving birth to my third child, I'm like, I think I'm going to go to business school, because that's the piece I'm missing. I went the whole way to my doctorate, but I feel like I'm missing this piece. And I'm so glad I did. So that's really how the worlds collided. It was just, I don't know, I need another challenge.
I really do think having that business understanding is really great and empowering to kind of take that next step in your career. So let me ask you, your forensic work exposed systematic gaps. What is the number one myth about trauma that even well-meaning leaders might believe?
Trauma affects everybody. Everybody. And in different ways. And it's okay to give ourselves that permission to be in that moment. Even if it's a situation that we had no control of, and our ability to make that decision or have the awareness, whatever happened, how we don't always have the option, right, of what happens to us, but we do have the option on what we do with that and how we process it and take accountability in the sense that we can move forward differently, even though it might take a while to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's two folds to that. I think that one, we think of nurses as being sort of like experts in medical field, and we just assume that encompasses mental health stuff too. But they're really not, and they see very traumatic things. And there's also like barriers, I think, to them getting the help that they want. I didn't realize this was such a systemic issue in so many different fields. But since we learned this from our own experience, I have talked to ER doctors, firefighters, EMT, like physicians, it doesn't matter. So many people who are in this world of really experiencing exponentially more trauma that are really afraid to access the resources to help them with these traumas. It's very much a motivator and a passion in the work that we're doing, is to make sure we can be a resource for those folks who feel fearful. You should never fear your job or your human right to access mental health. Like, I don't know how we got to this place, but that seems so wild to me that we are here.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so true. It's so unfortunate, but it is 100% spot on.
You advise Fortune 500 CEOs on regulation before resolution. How can teachers, since we kind of do work with the education system primarily, how can teachers do this with dysregulated students?
So teachers can really apply just having that trauma-informed lens, right? But it takes education. We don't know what we don't know. And so that's where folks like myself, with, consulting, coming in and just teaching, educating, allows teachers to feel equipped, have the autonomy and the confidence to interact and advocate for those students, particularly because they might be dysregulated, right? But it's not about why, like what are you doing? Why are you acting like this? It's more the thought process of what happened to you? How can we help you? Those are like the positive spins when it comes to trauma-informed care that I think a lot of folks miss. And it's a missed opportunity for the other person on the other end. But it really just takes that lens switching.
Well, and I think that you're right on it when you say they're just not trained. I think from my experience in education, mental health, SEL, any of these sort of like token words, they get thrown around all over. But when you really step back and look, you're like, is anybody actually doing what they're saying? Like, is this actually trauma-informed teaching, or are we just pretending like it is? It's kind of like organic in the food world. You're like, is this really organic or is this not? Right? Like, it's just some saying that we slap on. And we're not really doing our due diligence. The other thing that I will add to that I saw in the education world is there's confusion in what's happening in those dysregulated moments. Right now, they do have people who are experts in the building. They do. So many schools are getting more therapists and counselors and psychologists and social workers and all of these actual mental health experts in their building, which is a beautiful thing, an amazing thing. But what's happening is, Daren's teaching, he has a kid that's dysregulated. I'm the expert. I might take that kid, get that kid back online, cognitively back online, and bring him back to Daren. But what's happening is the teachers are sitting there like Daren and being like, so you just rewarded my kid. Like, my kid was throwing chairs. You took him for a walk. You let him go play basketball. You gave him a lollipop, and now he's back and he's my problem again. But even to that point, they don't understand, and they don't have enough training to understand, and no fault of their own, but to understand what is exactly that process that's happening when those kids are leaving with those experts, that person is getting your student regulated for you and cognitively back online. It is very purposeful. It is not just giving the kids like privileges and positive reinforcement for negative behaviors, but it's truly a scientific process. And we need, I think, that mentality and that culture to just not be in just that pocket of industry experts, but something that the teachers, the educators, anybody who is in that building can really understand exactly what's happening in a kid's brain when they're dysregulated, and how to tell that they're truly regulated again, and what their triggers are, and all of those things.
I would like to just piggyback off what you said, where they might feel unregulated and have trouble verbalizing that. And so that's where the, OT, occupational therapist, or a therapist would come in and work with parents and the kids collaboratively. So they're on the same page and be able to say, hey, I'm in red zone. I need to do this, and see that and follow whatever's going to work best for not only the child, person, but that unit, right, as a whole.
So you have said in your work that handcuffs aren't healthcare. I agree 100%. But how does trauma-informed care reduce recidivism when schools adopt it early?
All right. So it definitely, it helps equip the students, by handcuffs. Well, let me go back. Handcuffs, I think, is a very interesting term. Right? Are we talking handcuffs that are mentally, cuffing us? Are they physically cuffing us? Like, are we cuffed?
So easy to put a word or two or three words on something, be like, that's just why they are that, fundamental attribution error. Like, that's their stuff. When it's us, it's like, well, this is why.
I think that, for me, handcuffs and recidivism, because if you are any of those, like if I'm any of those growing up, right? Like if I am put in a situation where, like we grew up pretty poor, and that was normal to us, but there was trauma that went through that. And like, I didn't realize that till I got older. And then I was like, oh, now great. I get to do the work to undo this for, generational to try to break that cycle. But it really is for me, that feeling of restriction overall of like those labels, like you said, you're this, you're worthless, you're too anxious, like you're not getting up and doing anything, but maybe there's like an underlying component of like depression or like, PTSD. I've had PTSD before and it's awful. It is like throat clenching, awful, right? You can't breathe. And for me, that would be like the handcuff, right? That's the vice where I would need somebody during that time to know those triggers or see that and help me get back on track.
Yeah. And also like going back to this concept of generational trauma too. I mean, I have spent most of my life working in Black and Brown communities. And I think that one of the things when we talk about educators not being trauma informed, I think there's so much generational trauma that we're seeing in those settings. Even for me as a white woman going into these classrooms, immediately there is lots of trauma in that I am a repressor of the repressing, gender and race, right? And that's very triggering for my students. And I have to enter that space understanding that just existing is triggering for them. And I need to have a gentle intro into that and understand like cultural nuances that come with some of those generational traumas and generational cycles.
So apparently you did some work with UPS and it apparently reduced workplace injuries by up to 40%. What's the business case for trauma-informed workplaces?
See, this is where it gets tricky, okay? Because when we're talking about accidents, workplace accidents, that is traumatic for the person who the accident occurs to, the coworkers who are maybe there that might be blaming themselves for not seeing something or identifying something. And then also the company, right? Because media gets involved. And so the trauma-informed approach is also reaching across the aisle if there's commonalities and say, hey, we are all human. This can happen to anybody at any given time. Maybe it has. Maybe you know somebody, something similar. And, did you take them food? And I'm saying this for a reason. Did you take them food? Or did you get in the trenches with them? Because oftentimes when people are experiencing the traumatic events or, trying to come out of them, even companies and build back up, they want people who will get in the trenches and help guide them out, not just deliver a hot meal and say, peace. Have fun dealing with that. So, and to summarize that, and working with UPS was such an honor, to meet with their drivers, share some personal experiences, and personal experience you hope would help, but it doesn't always, because we're human, right? And sometimes we think we know better or we're invincible and it's not going to happen to us. And just the opportunity to at least open the door, plant the seeds, have those conversations and educate.
But the other thing too, that's always important to remember too, is secondary trauma. Again, I'm married to a police officer. This was something that was challenging for my husband. At first, he had a really, really traumatic incident. And I was talking to my friends about it. And he was like, what the heck, Erin? Why are you like talking about my trauma? And I'm like, but I have to process it too. And he went to his therapist and he learned like secondary trauma is real. And so when you think about these workplace traumas, it really isn't just stopping there. It really impacts, the people around you too.
That's exactly it. It's not just the person who, whether it's workplace or suicide in the family, like the ripples, they go so far.
And I think that's trauma in general, right? Like when we talk about people who are incarcerated, it's impacting the families that are not, the parts of their families that are not in prisons with them. When you talk about somebody who's an alcoholic, right? Like and wherever our sources of that trauma, there's always a ripple effect for sure.
Yeah. I like to say you can build the rest of your future with the bricks that people threw at you.
That one's a good one.
That's one of my mottos. I'm like, okay, keep throwing bricks. I'm just going to keep stacking them and keep moving forward.
So I'm going to keep us moving along. And I want to pivot into something like a bit more practical. I think Erin's got the next question for us.
Okay, so a parent might hear trauma informed and panic. How would you reframe this as empowerment and not something that is negative or triggering or challenging for them? How do you sort of destigmatize that for the parents? Because I do think parents tend to have a harder time with it than the kids.
I would say, I'm going to guess that we're all very similar in age. And I was just talking to a friend the other day who's also in the field, and we were talking about how we were raised not with that thought process, right? That's where that generational trauma really came in, because we weren't taught emotional regulation. And now we're adults with kids who have to be not only advocates and teachers, but then be able to self-identify like what we're doing. And my daughter the other day, I was like, really like, oh, flustered. And she said, "You're red, Mom. Are you red?" And I was like, "I am." And she was like, "Take a deep breath."
Okay, but not only are we now adults with kids that we have to help regulate, but also like we have given all of our kids all of the world's knowledge at their fingertips, and they are seeing and knowing things they can't see and unknow. So they are that experience is traumatic. And we are trying to learn how to understand our own trauma and our own generational triggers and all these things that we're trying to break within our own beings for our kids. But then we also have to really support them with this world of the internet and everything mental health challenge that comes with that.
Yeah. So that's just why I encourage people, like, how can we empower your child? How can we empower like your family dynamics? How can we empower your workplace that you're at? So that people feel supported to support others when they identify certain things. So that would be a way to kind of scale it back and maybe not use the exact phrasing. That it's more about empowering and equipping.
Educating. And really, I think always coming from a place of there's no blame, there's no judgment. We're all in this together and we're all just trying to figure it out. And we just know that there's this need. Yeah.
It's like the risk manager. Regardless of what you do, it's the risk manager. Everybody's afraid to death of her or him. They're like, oh my gosh, they called. And it's that re-education of, hey, they're here. It's a coachable moment. Are you going to be coachable is the question.
So you have 7 published books, and some of the content blends neuroscience with street smarts. What's something that's not flashy, but it like really helps the nervous system reset or feel safe?
I think coloring, any kind of art therapy, or just doodling,
or even brainless games on your phone. I think that's really triggering for parents because they're like, my teenager's obsessed with their phone. They're just playing this stupid like Tetris game. And you're like,
maybe they just need more pause to zone out. Going for a walk, feeling like I'm making a list. This sounds so silly, but I'm a list person. And I think that really helps just overall. Right? Feeling like, okay, we can hit some kind of mark today. I'm feeling this way or that way, but we still, and if we don't accomplish all of it, we'll just add it to tomorrow and it's okay.
All right. So last question. Let's just talk about a vision, your wildest vision. What does a trauma-free generation actually look like?
Oh, I hope it happens. I pray it happens. I am usually optimistic, but in this regard, I'm a little bit pessimistic because there's so much opposition, polarization, just in every aspect of life that I even, right, may unintentionally cause trauma to somebody without knowing it by a word I say. So if there's really this altruistic, trauma-free, like Jetson type thing, I would really say that it just comes down to people being people and being okay with other people where they're at and not listening to respond, but listen to getting in the trench.
I mean, it sounds a lot better than what we're doing right now. So I'm down.
So thank you, Dr. Shanea, so much for sharing your experiences. Like we could ask questions to you all day. Your perspective has been very valuable. And I just want to give you some time to tell us about your books.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me. My books really just stemmed from a really bad crash that I was involved in and kind of just buried for a long time, trying to navigate through everything that occurred after that. It wasn't until I heard Annie Ann Baylor's testimony actually at an event and literally had this download where like, now's the time. Now is the time because people need to hear a story that is, I don't even know, relatable, awful, in the trenches, and see that it is possible to get through on the other side.
Yes, absolutely. Amazing. I love that. I am all about stories that are, from trials to tribulation, from something that is awful to figuring out how to help humanity moving forward. So if your listeners or viewers want to connect with you or learn more about your work, how can they reach you?
Yes, I would love to connect. You can definitely reach out to all my socials. You can catch those on my website. I'm sure you guys might share the link, but it's www.shaneaclancy.com. And I also will have a form that can be filled out for like a free ebook to help with some of the things that we've talked about. I would love to give that to your audience and viewers as well.
Yes, we will definitely put all of that stuff, all of your info in the show notes for sure.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again for joining us today. We are extremely grateful for your time. And Erin, close us out.
To everyone listening or watching, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on your favorite podcast directory, leave us a 5-star rating and a review, please. If you are an expert in the mental health field, education, social justice, any of the topics that we talk about, and you would like to be on the show, feel free to email us at unplugged@undomindset.org with Unplugged Mindset in the subject line. We're always looking for voices just like yours to amplify, really destigmatize that human experience. Don't forget to share this episode with someone who might find it helpful. Getting out the word is one of the best ways that you can really support our mission of getting accessible, equitable mental health skills and tools out to as many humans and communities as we can. Helping us grow would be so helpful. We appreciate you all listening and taking the time to join us here today. Thank you so much and take care.